بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم وعلى آله الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه الطيبين ومن استنى بسنتهم إلى يوم الدين ثم أما بعد. So as always, we begin invoking and calling on and saying in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most beneficent and the especially merciful. And we ask Him and Him alone to send His peace, His blessings, and everlasting blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu his family, his good companions, and any of all of those who would attempt to follow in their footsteps until the day that we meet our Creator. Allahumma ameen. So, as what follows, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in His glorious book, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And give a reminder because most certainly or definitely a reminder benefits the believers. Right? Those people who say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's splendor and His grandeur, that He is unique, that He has no family, that He has no partners, that there is nothing like Him, that He is the only creator, provider, sustainer for all that exists. Whether they believe in Him, acknowledge that, surrender to that and accept it, or they don't, that does not change the fact that He is the only creator and provider and sustainer of all that exists. And those people who not only that, believe that, accept that, embrace that, live that, but they also believe that He is the only one who is deserving of worship, that He's the only one who is deserving of prayers, of sacrifice, of commitment, the ultimate commitment, and the ultimate and deepest of loyalty and love, that no one deserves this except Him. And all acts of worship are only to be directed to, dedicated, and surrendered and given to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and no one else. And they further believe that Prophet Muhammad, the son of Abdullah al-Hashimi and Qurashi, that he is the servant of Allah, the messenger of Allah, the prophet of Allah, that he has no share in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divinity, that he simply conveyed the message as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to do, and that he exemplified and lived that message as his wife Aisha radiallahu anha, our mother, she mentions when asking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his character and his conduct, she said khuluquhu khuluqul Quran, that his character is the Quran. And as such, the Prophet ﷺ, he fulfilled that trust and conveyed to his ummah, and that those who believe, that's what they believe. And he doesn't have any share in divinity, but that he is an example to be followed, and he is a teacher, right? To take his teachings, to be his disciple, to follow his guidance, and to live his legacy to the best of our ability. Those people who believe that, and those people who try to do that, and those people who believe that there is a day of judgment, that there is one day that there will be a reckoning and an accounting for every single human being, for every good that they've done, every charity that they've given, every kind word that they've expressed, every time that they helped somebody out, every time that they served, every time that they taught, whatever good that they did, that will be compensated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never overlook that. كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تحقروا من المعروف شيئا. Don't ever belittle any amount of good that you do, because it will never be looked over by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will reward you, right? But in turn, also every single misdeed, wrong deed, transgression, oppression, taking of a life, stealing, in any way, shape, form, or fashion, even if it seems that people may act with impunity, that they're not being held to account, that nothing seems to be happening to them, know for sure that there is a day where there is a grave, tremendous, scary reckoning for all who transgress against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so those people who believe in that, whenever they receive a reminder, whenever they are caught up in their heedlessness, and someone comes and says, yo, pay attention, sister, wake up, brother, come back to your senses, they benefit from that. They don't turn away from that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, a reminder will benefit those people who believe in those things. And so as such, I wanted to remind us about the importance of seeking sacred knowledge. First and foremost, that it is an obligation on us. In spite of everything that is happening, in spite of what we see in the news, on social media, in spite of tragedies, difficulties, in spite of whatever might be going on in your life, learning, growing, developing in your faith, in your iman, in your deen, is a religious obligation. Because even when you're dealing with, facing, seeing different things happen all around you, right? Aside from trying to process that, one of the things that inevitably and naturally comes up are questions. And in order to be able to answer those questions in a meaningful way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to go back to Him. You have to go back to His book. You have to go back to His apostle, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his guidance. You have to look to the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ridwanullahi alayhim, because they were his direct disciples and his students who were there when Quran was being revealed, who were there when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did this, that, or the third. Whatever it might be, this is what we have to go back to. So it is an obligation, and that is on the tongue of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, طَلَبَ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ, that seeking sacred knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that we have to understand, without sacred knowledge, without knowledge of the Quran, Kalam Allah, without knowledge of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the proper understanding of those two sources of revelation, then one's deeds, right, will not be accepted. Right? And I wanted to share this one hadith that's in Sahih al-Bukhari and in other places that illustrates what is meant by that. Right? That someone could pray, that someone could fast, that someone could fight jihad, that someone could give charity, that someone could do some act, and on the outset, on the looking at it, right, on the surface, you're like, mashallah, man, alhamdulillah, sister prayed, brother gave charity, mashallah, they died, yani fi sabilillah, whatever it might be. On the outset, it looks like maqbool inda Allah. It looks like it's accepted by Allah. Why not? It's a righteous deed. Sister gave some charity, brother gave some charity, brother taught this or that, whatever it is. However, let us pay attention and look at what the Prophet ﷺ teaches us. So it's a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, and the Prophet ﷺ was in the masjid, right? And he's with some of the companions, and another man enters the masjid, and it's mentioned that it was Khalad ibn Rafi', and he prayed. All right, he prayed in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ, and then ثم جاء فسلم على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فرد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم السلام. So after he prayed, he comes to the Prophet ﷺ now, right, who's essentially chilling with some of his companions, and he gives salams to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ returns the salams and said, Irja, go back and pray. فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تُصَلِّ, because you did not pray. Now he looked like he prayed. That's what he thought. And the Prophet ﷺ said what? What did we just say that he said? He said, go back. Nah, you didn't pray. Irji, فَصَلِّ فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تُصَلِّ. Go back and pray because you didn't pray. So the man, he goes back. فَرَجَعَ فَصَلَّى. And then he came back. And again, he gave salams to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ returned those salams. And he said, go back. فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تُصَلِّ, because you didn't pray. And this happened 3 times. Right? And then it's at this point that the Sahabi, this companion, he says, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَكَ بِالْحَقِّ, by the one who sent you, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, with the truth. فَمَا أُحْسِنُ غَيْرَهُ, I don't know any better than this. I can't do better than what you just saw me do. Right? I don't got better than that. He says, فَعَلِّمْنِي, so teach me. Show me the way. Show me how you think I should pray. How you know that I'm supposed to pray. Tell me. Teach me. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he goes on to tell him, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَكَبِّرْ وَاقْرَأْ مَا تَيَسَّرَ مَعَكَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ ثُمَّ ارْكَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا ثم ارفع حتى تعدل قائما ثم اسجد حتى تطمئن ساجدا ثم ارفع حتى تطمئن جالسا ثم اسجد حتى تطمئن ساجدا ثم افعل ذلك في صلاتك كلها أو كلها. رواه البخاري. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he goes on to tell him that when you pray or when you stand up to pray, then, right, kabbir, right, which means to say Allahu Akbar, then read, right, what's easiest for you from the Quran, then prostrate, or excuse me, bow, right, and be right, and be straight when you do it, right. And then he goes on and he explains how to pray, and he says, right, essentially standing, bowing, prostrate, and then he goes on to say, right, in brief, then do that in every rak'ah. So what is the point here that we want to take away, right? And Imam al-Nawawi, he explains this hadith. Imam ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah, also explains this hadith, and there are numerous benefits. But what I want to point out is that somebody might be doing a righteous action, or they think they're doing a righteous action, when in reality, it's possible that they're doing it what? That they're doing it wrong. And as such, if they had the opportunity to be taught, they had the opportunity, because look, the Prophet ﷺ was in his presence, right? So he had the opportunity to find out the right way. Then, if they don't take that opportunity, it very well may be that what you do, the fasting, the jihad, the sadaqah, the charity, the teaching, the learning, whatever good deed that it might be for what? It might be for nothing. It might be, irja, go back, right? And so that's why we have this, where we're going through Sha'ban in preparation for Ramadan, right? So that when we fast, we don't want to hear, irji, go back, go back because you didn't fast. That's not the way the Prophet ﷺ fast. That's not the way that it was in the Quran. That's not the way in the legacy of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to avoid that, because we are hoping that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when we go into this Ramadan, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to reach the blessed month of Ramadan, that when we're thirsty and we're hungry and we're tired and we're hangry, right, and we're in that state of self-denial, the hope is that what? That Allah will accept it from us. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept that thirst from us, and that hunger from us, and that self-denial, and that biting my tongue when somebody said something to me and I had to step on my ego. Not because I was afraid of them, not because I couldn't do something about it, but because, right, I'm hoping that Allah will accept my fast. Because I'm trying to keep my mind and my eye on a prize that's bigger than feeding my ego, because it might feel good. It might feel good if I said something back, if I cursed back, if I struck back, if I, But the idea is that we want it to be accepted. And the first and important critical step is learning. And this is not, brothers and sisters, just for fasting. This is for your deen in general. The importance of learning. And I'll make one last point on this before we move on, is that, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, many of us simply rely on, right, what we learned on Saturday and Sunday school, right, when we were young, right, when you were going to Duksi or Madrasa, or maybe it was on Sunday, or maybe it was just on Saturday, right? But then I want you to consider this: what you needed and what you're going through in elementary and middle school, right, is not the same. The issues that you face, the questions you may have, the answers that you need, they're not the same once you get into high school. And then when you transition from high school, right, you have a whole nother set of issues and questions. Because from high school, school is, in general, for free. Once you go to college, just one example. Now you got to think about, should I take loans or should I not take loans? What should I be studying and dedicating my life to a career for for my studies for the next 4 years? What should I be choosing? Can I go into this field or this career? Because it might be haram. You have to ask yourself some questions. Do you have to ask yourself that question when you're in middle school? No, you don't. So the information you get in middle school, right, it's not the same, or it may not equip you to answer everything that you are facing and dealing with when you're in high school or in college. Which means what then? That means there's certain learning that has to go on when you're young. And then there's more learning and a different learning, or I shouldn't say different, but an extension of and expanding and furthering of what you're learning in middle school, high school, then college. Then what comes after college, or maybe even during college, marriage. And then with marriage, what's naturally after that? 1 + 1, inshallah, bidillah, going to equal 3. And then there's, how do I raise my kids? What are my responsibilities as a husband? What are my responsibilities as a wife? Again, stuff you wouldn't have been studying if you were in elementary school or middle school. So that means what? That learning should be an ongoing part and parcel of your life as a Muslim. That it doesn't stop now that I finished the Green Book, or now that I finished, I read the Quran once. I read it once through, or I read it 2 times. I memorized it that one time, not the for real memorizing. You know the memorizing where you just do your subah, you do your asha or whatever, and then you're done. Not that. And then khalas, I don't have to do no more. Not that. That's not enough. And then of course, even as you get older, right, it does not stop. Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah, right, he was seen, right, in his later years, when he's older, and he's already become this renowned scholar and teacher and notable luminary in Islam. And he has an ink pot with him. And somebody mentions, right, Ya Abu Abdullah, ma'ak al-mihbara, wa anta al-imam. They said, you still got this ink pot, and you're like this notable, illustrious imam, right? Because in their time, they used to memorize everything. So he's like, why do you even need this now? You've already, you know what I'm saying? You've already reached that level. You're that dude, like khalas. And so he says, Ma'i al-mihbara ila al-maqbara. He said, this will stay with me until I reach the grave. Until I take a dirt nap. I.e., he's saying what? That I am a lifelong learner. And as Muslims, right, every last one of us must be, and especially in our circumstances, not just the alim, not just the mu'allim, or the ma'alim, or the sheikh, or the da'i. All of us should be lifelong learners. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate and make that easy for us. Allahumma ameen. One might even say he already has. But that's for another time, inshallah. So, inshallah, if I'm not mistaken, we finished chapter 4 last week, right? About, in that book, Al-Majalisu Al-Ramadaniya, the Ramadan lounging sessions by Sheikh Walid Idris Al-Manisi, Hafidhullah. And inshallah, we're going to be going to now chapter 5 of the book, which we did make available for those of you who may have missed that first session. We gave out the book, but we also, there's the PDF on the Brooklyn Park Islamic Center WhatsApp group. Is that what it's called? Salat, it's called Salat BPIC, right? Yeah. The WhatsApp group? Yeah, if you go on there, maybe somebody could share it right now if you're not in there, but if you wanted to follow along the book that we're going through, it's in there, it's available. Now, so, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Thumma amma ba'd. Inshallah, the Sheikh quickly mentions just a couple of things that need to be known when it comes to some of the base rulings about fasting. First and foremost, what is fasting linguistically, right? The definition, but then also Islamically, the technical definition or the Islamic terminology, what is fasting. So first and foremost, Siyam or as-Siyam, fasting, It means, right, to abstain from, to stay away from, to not indulge in, to not partake of, right? Imsak, denial, right? That's what it means. To abstain or to stay away from something. Right? And then as far as linguistically, or excuse me, technically, it has a few things. It is to do that imsak, to abstain or stay away from, the mufattilat, and we'll talk about what mufattilat are, but the things that break your fast, right? With intention. With the intention, and this is important, that has to be mentioned, because somebody could be not eating, for example, just because they don't have food, or they missed their breakfast because they was at work, and then they were so busy at work the whole day, so they didn't even eat or drink, and they just got so busy. That person, although in the linguistic sense they are fasting, they didn't eat, right? They are not being rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they just simply forgot to eat, I was so busy. Or in a diet, right? And they have like intermittent fasting or something like that. Again, they don't have the intention or the right intention, excuse me, then that person is not rewarded. So it is to abstain from those things that break your fast with the intention, right? Or with intention, excuse me, from Tulu' al-Fajr al-Sadiq, right? From the Fajr until the setting of the sun. Until the setting of the sun. All right? And of course, we know that fasting, and then we're going to go into details about those things. But first, we just want the linguistic definition and the technical definition. Who can repeat what they are? No, who says?
The linguistic definition is to abstain from something, or to hold oneself back from something. And the technical definition is to abstain yourself from food, drink, and other things that break your fast. Right. With the intention that you are doing it for Allah's sake.
For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? From Tulu' al-Fajr, Sadiq, and until the Maghrib. So now as far as the ruling of fasting, right? So that's the linguistic definition. Technical definition, now what is the ruling of fasting? First one was what is fasting? Now what is the ruling of it? And by ruling we mean in the Sharia, right? In fiqh, what is the status of fasting? First and foremost, it is one of the arkan of Islam. It is one of the pillars of Islam, right? And this is taken from numerous hadith, but one of the most famous ones, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, where he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Bunya al-Islamu ala khams," right? That Islam was built on 5 pillars. Islam stands on 5 pillars, columns, that if one of them or if more than one of them were to fall, someone's Islam may be in jeopardy. And the first one that he says is to testify to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there's no one worthy of worship except Him, and the prophethood and messengership of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to establish the prayers, to give charity, right? But more specifically, the prescribed charity, if you have wealth, excess wealth, for 12 lunar months, right? And it passes a certain threshold, then you are to give that excess wealth, right, in charity, 2.5% of it. 2.5% of it, that's zakat, which is different from sadaqah. Right? Sadaqah is charity. I gave somebody $2, I donated $10 to the masjid, right? That's just sadaqah, or zakat is a pillar of Islam, right? And there are details of it that you look into the books of fiqh to find. And then the other one is Sawm Ramadan, fasting the month of Ramadan, and then of course, making Hajj, the greater pilgrimage, at least once in a lifetime, for whoever is able to do so. That hadith is in both Bukhari and Muslim with the same wording, i.e. muttafaqun alayh, right? And then, of course, you have the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, right, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum Everybody knows this. We hear it every Ramadan. You hear it every time we're getting close to, right, the month of Ramadan and fasting. Oh, you who believe. This is from Surah Al-Baqarah. Fasting has been prescribed for you, and this is where we get that it's an obligation. That word, kataba, right, which is synonymous with farada or wajaba, right? Allah has written it for you, prescribed it for you, mandated it for you. It's an obligation. Not only for you, but the nations that came before you. كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. And the peoples that came before you, it was also written and prescribed for them. In hopes that, right, that you may attain spiritual clarity, in hopes that you may attain God consciousness, in hopes that you may attain taqwa, right? Or so that you may attain taqwa. And that is the primary goal of fasting, right? It's not the hunger, it's not the thirst, it's not the self-denial, right? That is all a process with the hope that through that process, someone will be able to recalibrate themselves and recalibrate their iman and recalibrate their life focus that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so then moving forward, they hopefully live what? A God-centered life. Every time I make a decision, whether it's a job, marriage, I leave a job, even a divorce, I make this payment, I go to school, where the neighborhood that I choose to live in, I do this business transaction, I abstain from this business transaction, who my friends are, entertainment, everything in my life, right? At the center of it, all of that is, you know what I'm saying? Like the proton, neutron, and electron, it's all swirling around that nucleus, and at that nucleus is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that when I choose my entertainment, because I need to relax, it can't be all work and no play, but even then, I'm like, all right, I gotta make sure what I'm doing is halal, permissible, it's not getting me, right, driving me further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It might even be I'm doing something halal, but I do it too much, and even that could bring me away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But the point though is that what? My decisions are driven by, does this please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I do it as much as I possibly can. Does this take me away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and draw a wedge between me and Him and draw me further away from Him to earn His ire, His anger, His wrath, and His punishment? Then I stay away from it as much as I possibly can. That's it. Those two questions. Right? And that's what it means when you're having taqwa. Right? That I'm careful about that. So that's the ayah though. And then of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. That whoever witnesses or sees or is present, they're there, right? When the month of Ramadan comes in, then let him or her fast. Again, these are all statements, whether from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or on the tongue of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, showing us the tremendous status that fasting has in Islam. And as such, because of that, because it's not fasting like Mondays and Thursdays. It's not like we said about, for example, the sadaqah. Because those, you do it, alhamdulillah, it's better for you. It lets you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It purifies your wealth, right? It improves your standing, but you don't have to. If you're like, that's a little bit too much for me, I can't handle it, or I'm too busy right now, maybe later on, okay, that's no problem, right? Somebody might be fasting, let's say Mondays and Thursdays, and they get an invitation from somebody who, you know what I'm saying, somebody that they don't want to offend. My mom invites me to the house to eat. She done already made all the food, but I'm fasting though, on a Monday, right? Now she's invited me, she done already cooked the food. I might break that fast. I might break that fast. I don't want to upset, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to upset Hoya. I don't want to make her mad, and this is not an obligation. So I break it on purpose, intentionally. That's acceptable. Allah you send me. But now, for Ramadan, no. It is of such a status and a place that someone to break their fast intentionally, and depending on how they break it, right? But it is a grave sin, right? That is a major sin to break your fast intentionally on purpose. All right, and subhanAllah, it's one of the gravest of sins or cardinal sins. And depending on how they do that, it very well may be, right, that they either A, just have to make it up, qada with a kafara. It could be, for example, if it's with through intercourse and they intentionally do that with their spouse, right, that goes without saying, then not only would it have to be qada, that they have to make it up, but the kafara is on another level. And it's not just I have to make it up one day and just feed one poor person. But we'll leave that till when we get to it, inshallah. Mm-hmm. We might as well just mention right now. They said he already mentions it here. So he says, al-siyam, the first thing would be, if someone was to do so through intercourse, they would have to free a slave, right? That's the first thing they would have to do. You'd be like, well, it's 2024. We don't do that no more. That's not done no more. We don't have one. Okay, tell you. Then the next thing would be, right? If you can't manumit a slave, then it would be that you have to fast continually, back to back. Not like when you're making a fasting, you can fast for a couple of days, then leave it off, then fast for a couple more days, all up until the next Ramadan comes in. No. You gotta fast consecutively for 2 months. شهرين متتابعين. And then someone might say, okay, I'm not able to do that. Then you would have to feed, right, 60 poor people. 60 poor people. The point here is that what? Right? That it is a grave sin, right? So much so, right? That there are, it's not enough for you to just simply say, astaghfirullah. No. You have to rectify and make amends. And there are things that you have to do in order to accomplish that. Now, as far as fasting, there are 2 pillars of fasting itself. There are 2 pillars of fasting itself, and we kind of already mentioned it, which were what? What were the 2 pillars of fasting that we already mentioned? Like the things that have to be there for it to be considered fasting. The intention was number 1, your niyyah, right? As the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in both Bukhari and Muslim, it's muttafaqun alayh, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ, that deeds are by their intentions. Everything you do has a why behind it. There's a reason behind it, everything, right? So, including your fasting, it has to have the proper niyyah and intention. That's number 1. What's number 2? From staying away from, right, those things that would break your fast, right? And so if anyone was to do that, right, and we already mentioned, if you did that, but like on accident, let's say you abstained from eating anything, you got up for work, prayed Fajr, left for work, you were a little bit late, so you're rushing, you don't have your coffee, you don't eat, you go through work, and as soon as you get there, you're inundated, you're busy, so on and so forth, and you forget to eat. You don't even have a chance. You're so busy to eat. And then you go through your whole day, and you don't even realize, man, it's already time for me to go home. And then on your way home, by the time you get home, it's already Maghrib time, right? That person, because they didn't have the niyyah, right? Even though they abstain from mufattirat, they are not being rewarded for their fasting. And then likewise, vice versa, if you had the intention, right, but you have the right intention, but then you break your fast by eating something, you're like, all right, I remember talking to my child's school when they were like in elementary, and my daughter asked me to fast. She said she wanted to fast. So we go to the school, right, just to, make things easy for them. They don't understand what fasting is. They're not Muslims or whatever. So I go to them and I say, hey, my daughter, she's going to be fasting, right? So just so you're aware, you know what I'm saying, when it's lunchtime, can she just stay in the classroom or go? She doesn't want to be around the food or whatever, right? And they're like, oh, okay. But she's only like 10 years old, right? Could she like maybe have water, right? She's not eating, right? She's still abstaining from all the other mufattirat. So she's not eating, no orange juice, not, you know what I'm saying, it's a pizza or a cheeseburger, whatever. But can't you just have, can't you just have some water because, the kids, they feel tired and whatever. I was like, no, I'm not sure about, what your religion might be, but for me and for Islam, I'm explaining to you that is not considered fasting for us. So, no. If she tells you she feels sick, that'd be something different. But no, just in general, off the rip, no, she cannot just have water. And she doesn't want to. She's asking for that. But the point though is that what? You'd be like, well, it's just water. It's something small or innocent. What's the big deal? But then you're going against one of the pillars of fasting, which is to have no food and no drink whatsoever. Right? Now, and then the Shaykh, he goes on, وَمَعْنَا يُجْمِعْ الصِّيَامِ أي يعزم على الصيام. We mentioned that وهذا الحديث في الصيام الفرق وأما الصيام والتطوع فلا يشترط له التبييت النية من الفجر. Now there is an issue about when is the intention. Like when should the intention be? Do I have to have my intention every single night, right? Before Fajr, the following day? Or is it enough that I have one niyyah, right, before Ramadan starts? My intention is to fast the entirety of Ramadan, and then that's it? Is that okay when we're talking about the niyyah? Right? And the Shaykh, right, he brings a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ talking about when you have to have your niyyah. And it says that you need to have it every single night before Fajr. And this is based on a hadith that is in Muslim Imam Ahmed, where the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Man lam yujmi' al-siyam qabla al-fajr, fala siyam lah." That whoever doesn't have yujmi', and what is meant by yujmi', meaning that they don't have the resolve and the intention, right? That this is what I'm finna do tomorrow. That if they don't have that every night before Fajr, meaning essentially after Isha up until Fajr, right? Somewhere in between there, you gotta have it. He said if you don't do that, then there is no fasting for you. Then you didn't fast, right? And so because of this, the majority of scholars say that you have to have the intention every single night. Now, there is an opinion, right, of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, where he says that it is enough for somebody to have one niyyah at the beginning of Ramadan, the first night of Ramadan, right? And I'll just read what he mentions here. فيقول يكفي نية واحدة في أول ليلة من رمضان لشهر كله والنية محلها القلب ولا يشرع التلفظ بها. فالخلاصة أن المطلوب من المسلم في كل ليلة من الليالي رمضان أن يكون ناويا بقلبه أو يصوم يوم التالي وهذا بحمد الله أمر تيسير. So Imam Malik rahimahullah, he has a slightly different opinion that you don't have to do it every night. He says that it's enough the first night of Ramadan if you have one niyyah that I'm going to, but you have to be thinking that I'm going to fast the whole Ramadan. And then in doing so, that is enough. And there is no reason for you, and all of the scholars, they agree on this. You do not say it with your mouth. The place of your niyyah, your intention, is in your heart. You don't say, right, that I'm about to fast right now. Even though there are some people who do that. For example, you might come to pray the salah, right? And sometimes you'll hear people when they're making their takbir. They say, Inni nawaitu yani salat al-dhuhr, yani arba' raka'atin lillahi, so on and so forth. This is not from the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no authentic hadith where he does this, right? For any deeds other than in Hajj. For any deeds other than in Hajj. But outside of that, the place that you have your intention, your niyyah, is in your heart, right? I'll give you an example. It's a simple thing too, this issue. Sometimes people make it more difficult than it is for whatever reason. If you're hungry and you get up, right, and you go to the fridge, do you have to say out loud, I'm going to the fridge because I'm hungry and I'm making a sandwich with some juice, right, to satiate my hunger and my thirst? No, you don't have to do that. You don't do that. But you know exactly why you got up, went to the fridge, grabbed the food, sat down, and ate it, because you was hungry. And similarly, when you get up, right, and you want to, let's say you're here at the masjid, and Salat al-Isha comes in, like it's about to in a little bit, right? And some of y'all already came, and you know that, right, that's the Salat that comes in. If you got up, because you didn't have wudu, or you broke your wudu, or whatever, and you go to the bathroom, you don't have to say, I'm washing, right, because I'm doing this for the Salah. You know exactly why you're doing it. It's unspoken. It is something that is unspoken, and it's something that's going on in here, right? Does that make sense, y'all? Now, as far as the Sheikh's opinion here, I would say you have this here. The majority of scholars say that you should have the niyyah every night. That you should have the niyyah every night. You do have a notable, reputable, alim, luminary in Islam, Imam Malik, rahimahullah, the father of the Maliki madhab, Malik ibn Anas, rahimahullah, saying, right, that one is enough. However, what I would say to you, or in consideration, is you have the statement of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a term, ahwat, what is more careful, right? What would seemingly be, right, is that if you go with the clear statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and following that. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you don't make, if you don't have that resolve, right? قبل الفجر, فلا صيام له. That's straightforward, right? And it would say, rather than getting into a discussion of difference of opinion, this scholar said, this sheikh said, right? قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The simplest, straightforward, safest thing is that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said this, and then rolling with that. Because if you do that, is there a possibility of you being wrong? Is there a possibility of you being wrong? No. If you go with this other opinion, is there a possibility of being right? Yes, there is. Is there a possibility of being wrong? Yes, there is. So it would make, right, to make that choice. But if you know somebody who happens to go with that opinion, right, I'm mentioning it because it's not haphazard. That's not somebody simply following their hawa. If they say, that's what my sheikh, that's what I was taught, this is what I learned, you know what I'm saying, Maliki madhab, I'm from such and such a country, this is what, alhamdulillah, right? You still correct them, you still share with them, but if they go with that, right, there's no need to argue, fight, or what have you. I hope that makes sense. Then the Shaykh goes on, وَأَمَّا رُكْنَ الثَّانِي مِنْ أَرْكَانِ الصَّوْمِ فَهُوَ الْإِمْسَاكُ عَنِ الْمُفَطِّرَاتِ. So the second pillar is abstaining from those things that would break your fast, right? And the mufattirat, namely are three that are mentioned in the Quran. In Surah Al-Baqarah in ayah number 187, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ ثُمَّ أَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and now you can go ahead, right, and enjoy and bashiruhunna, meaning your spouses, وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, and go ahead and partake of, what you desire from what Allah has written for you, right? So that's the intimacy, right, with one spouse. وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا, and then go ahead and eat and drink until the white thread becomes clear from the black thread of fajr. So the main three mufattirat that we know of, right, are what? What did we just mention now?
Intimacy with spouse.
Intimacy with spouse, the wife or the husband, right?
Eating and drinking.
Eating and drinking, right? from طلوع الفجر until the Maghrib. Now, there are other things that potentially will break your fast. These are the main three that everybody knows, but there are others as well. So, for example, anything that would lead to jima', right, or intercourse or intimacy, right, that ultimately ends with ejaculation. So, foreplay, right, in and of itself does not break one's fast. But if that foreplay leads to ejaculation, kissing, again, kissing in and of itself does not, because the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, where she mentions that the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, right, he would kiss us before leaving the house, right, and he was fasting, right? So that's kissing in and of itself. However, if it leads to, right, ejaculation, right, or climaxing, then that would be what? That would break your fast. And now, in the same with, yani akramakumullah, and I should make a disclaimer here, there are certain things that we may mention that require a level of maturity from all of us, right? But we can't shy away from these things because it's from our deen. So they need to be mentioned. And I know there are some young people in here, but again, these are things that we have to learn about. Better that you learn about it, right, in a safe environment from the deen than from somewhere else that might be a whole bunch of other added spices and other stuff that's not from the deen. So also masturbation, right, that would break someone's fast. So that's number 4, right? I already mentioned the hadith, right? Right, al-muhim. And then number 5, the 5th thing that breaks your fast, right, are those things, any shots that someone might receive that have some type of nourishment in it. Any shots, right, that have some type of nourishment in it, right? So the Shaykh, he says, ما كان بمعنى الأكل والشرب هو حقن الدم والإبر المغذية لأنها تغني عن الطعام والشراب. So for example, if somebody was to receive an IV, right, usually if somebody's like really dehydrated, right, or sick, or they just had some type of, medical procedure, they usually give you an IV, right, and it has some type of nourishment in it, hydration, it might have minerals, electrolytes, whatever, right, that would break your fast, even though you're not eating, even though it doesn't necessarily go to your stomach, right, obviously go straight to your bloodstream, but that would break your fast. He says, وهذا المختلف فيه بين العلماء والاحتياط للسائل اجتنابه إلى العذر إلا لعذر, excuse me. And then there are those shots. He says there is some difference of opinion among scholars as to whether or not they break your fast, but the more careful opinion, which we mentioned earlier, right, what is known as ahwat or ihtiyat, is to stay away from them and avoid them altogether. Well, he said, وَالْإِحْتِيَاطُ لِلسَّائِمِ لِلصَّائِمِ اجْتِنَابُهُ إِلَّا لِلْعُذْرِ, is to avoid those things unless you have some genuine excuse. وَإِذَا احْتَاجَ الصَّائِمِ إِلَى الْحِقْنِ الدَّمِ أو الجلوكوز فإنه يقضي هذا اليوم احتياطا حتى لو لم يتناول شيئا آخر من المفطرات. وإن كانت العادة أن من احتاج للحقن الدم أو إبر مغذية يكون مريضا وللمريض يباح له أن يفطر ويقضي يوما مكانه. So he goes into some detail about the different types of things that someone may need to take, right? Like if they have to take, for glucose, or again, these different types of shots. He says, even though there's a difference of opinion, he said the safest thing is for you to consider that your fast is broken and that you should go ahead and make that up. Again, he is not going into the detailed academic discussion of which opinion is more right. He's simply saying that what is more careful. And there's a difference, right? He's not going and saying, this is my opinion, that this one is right and this one is wrong. He's just saying, listen, there's a discussion. This one is saying your fast is broken if you take a shot. If you, right, have any shots that somehow gives you nourishment. He's saying that's one opinion, that it will break your fast. And then the other opinion is that it doesn't break your fast, you can go ahead and keep fasting. He's saying, but here's the thing though. If you consider it breaking a fast, and you make up that fast, you essentially covered your bases. If you don't consider that it breaks your fast, and you didn't somehow make that up, but in reality you have broken your fast, what happens now? You now essentially have a debt with Allah that you were supposed to fast and make that up, but you didn't, right? Because you chose that opinion. He's saying, we're just going to sidetrack a whole deeper academic discussion, and he's just saying the safest thing in this regards is go ahead and consider broke your fast. If you decide to do that, you just make it up anyways. I hope that's clear, y'all. Right? Now, tell you. He says, التطيع عمدا, and essentially is to throw up on purpose, right? Now, somebody might be like, why would somebody do that? Like, for example, if you feel ill or you feel kind of, sick, somebody might force themselves to throw up to make themselves, feel better or whatever. But whatever the reason, if you were to make yourself throw up on purpose, if you make yourself throw up on purpose, then this will break your fast. And this is based on a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that whoever man dara'ahu, al-qayb, فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ قَضَاء وَمَنْ اسْتَقَاءَ عَمْدًا فَلْيَقْضِي. That whoever, essentially, they couldn't control it, and it was an uncontrollable, like spitting up or throwing up. He said, then there's nothing on you. That's not against you. But if you do it on purpose, you took a pen, or you took your toothbrush, or you put your finger in your mouth, and you did it on purpose, right? Then that breaks your fast, and you need to make that up if you did that on purpose. And then he goes on to mention some things that don't break your fast, but oftentimes people think they do. So for example, getting hijama, he says the overwhelming majority of scholars do not consider that to be something that breaks your fast, right? He said, رَخَصَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وسلم لِلصَّائِمِ فِي الْحِجَامَةِ. That the Prophet ﷺ gave license to a fasting person to go ahead and have the procedure of hijama, which is cupping along with bloodletting. So there's cupping that's just with air where it has the suction and it draws the blood to that area or whatever. Even you see non-Muslims do that as a type of homeopathic type of medicine. Bloodletting has that same procedure, right? Where there's a cupping, where there's a suction that's created, whether you use some type of suction cup or they use something where they burn like either a piece of paper or a match, and then in the cup, and then it sucks up all the oxygen, they remove it, and then the cup sucks on there, drawing the blood to that area. But they make small incisions first in that area so that that suction will pull out or draw the blood, right? And this was a type of healing that the Prophet ﷺ used to practice. And the Sahaba and the Arabs of that time, they used to do, and even till today. And there are actually some places here in Minnesota where they have people who are like certified in order to do that. No, but the point we want to make here is that it does not break your fast. And then he also mentions وَكَذَلِكَ لَيْسَ مِنَ الْمُفَطِّرَاتِ الْإِبْرَ الْعِلَاجِيَّةِ غَيْرِ الْمُغْذِيَةِ. Shots that are not nourishing, those don't break your fast. And also those things وَلَيْسَ مِنَ الْمُفَطِّرَاتِ وُصُولِ الشَّيْءِ إِلَى الْجَوْفِ عَنْ طَرِيقِ المنفذ غير الفم والأنف لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى الصائم عن المبالغة في الاستنشاق فوضع قطرة أو الكحل في العين. Alright, so other things that also don't break your fast, such as if there's a little bit of water, right, that happens to reach Your throat, عن طريق excuse me, that get to you other than through your nose and your mouth. Excuse me, right? Although you should be careful. So anything, excuse me, that gets to your stomach somehow, which most likely would be some type of medical procedure or whatever, but as long as it doesn't go through your nose or your mouth, because the Prophet ﷺ, he used to advise to be careful and warn the companions that when you are making wudu, right, when you're cleaning, there's something called istinsha, right, where you are taking in water in your mouth as well as in your nose, right, and when you do that, you could, if you make mubalagha, if you exaggerate in it, it could end up water goes in your throat. That's a problem. Or if it goes in your nose, right, which your sinuses will lead to your throat, which will go to your stomach. That's a problem, right? He says if it doesn't go that way, but it reaches to your stomach, which would mean, right, what I'm imagining is some type of medical procedure, right? If something gets to your stomach then that way, then that doesn't break your fast. But you should be careful when it comes to washing your mouth and your nose. And then also, miswak does not break your fast. It's actually encouraged when you're using it, right, to clean your mouth and whatnot. And also, if you were to rinse your mouth with water, that does not break your fast, right? And then the last couple of things, he mentions, wal-ihtisal bil-madmadati wal-istinsha. I already mentioned that. And this is the last thing we covered, the 6 conditions and obligation for the obligation of wudu. So a question would be asked, is everybody being told to fast? Does every single person have to fast? Muslim, non-Muslim, young, old, men, women, right? Who is it an obligation on to fast? And there are 6 conditions, right, that determine whether or not somebody has to fast. Number 1, the first one is Islam, right? Which means then a non-Muslim, right? Let's say, for example, like Islamic Awareness Week, or maybe your colleagues or co-workers who say we want to, know what it's for in solidarity with our Muslim neighbors and co-workers or whatever, we want to fast too. This person is not being rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can do that if they want to, alhamdulillah. We wouldn't say don't do it, but know that they're not being rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only someone who says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. That's the first condition. That's number 1. Then the second one is what's known as bulugh, right? Or someone's reached what is considered Islamically a mature level, or, they've reached adolescence. فلا يجب الصوم على الصغار ولكن على ولي الأمر أن يأمرهم به ويعودهم عليه حتى إذا بلغوا. Right? And so the way that somebody is determined to be baligh is they reach puberty, right? And those physical signs and markers, right, for brothers and sisters, right? So whether it is pubic hairs, armpits, right, or in their intimate or private parts, obviously, and then also if there is ejaculation, right, and then also if there is menses. All of those biological markers, right, indicate that someone is baligh, right? What if they're 10 years old? They are baligh. What if they're 11 years old? They are, Islamically, they are baligh, and meaning now they are required. It go, right? Even though we might be like, oh, but they're, like I said, and sometimes that happens, right? A lady may come of age, right, seemingly a little bit earlier, not 14, not 15, and the same for a young man, although it's not typical, but he might, 12 years old, 11 years old, 13 years old. They are now required to fast, pray, etc. Right? That's bad. And then thirdly is an aql. Oh, and I'm sorry, and he mentions about the importance of training young ones, even though they're not required when they're 7 years old, when they're 8 years old, when they're 9 years old, even if they haven't reached, they're not baligh, but the importance of training them and getting used to them fasting. And likewise, the same thing could be said about prayer, The same thing could be said about hijab. The same thing could be said about, right, the different practices in Islam. Salat al-Tahajjud. Salat al-Tahajjud, for example, right? These type of things, not waiting until they're 15, 17, 16 years old, when now they may not even want to do it by then. And unfortunately, there are many families who, right, who do that, where they be like, no, I want to let them, let them do it on their own and let them figure it out on their own and their choice. And they might seem like, that seems like really, advanced parenting, or like, you know what I'm saying, like, gentle parenting. When in reality, it's just you being permissive and allowing kids, right, to follow their nafs. Right? There's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed you as parents in their life. That is so you can teach and guide them. Right? But inshallah, next thing, there's only three more. They have to have al-aql, which means that they're not mentally unstable or unconscious, right? And that's to be mentally unstable. That is to be determined by a medical professional, right? Or someone in a coma, or someone who's unconscious. They are not, right, held liable. So al-aql. The next is qudra, that they have the ability, and that essentially goes into a couple of things: that they're not chronically ill, or that they're not, right, elderly, and it's like harmful to them to fast. Right? And when we say chronically ill, meaning that they are sick and Allahu A'lam if they're going to be cured. Right? Because somebody could be sick temporarily, but we mean chronically ill like diabetes, and it doesn't go nowhere. Or, may Allah protect all of us, like someone has cancer, right? And they have to have treatments, like, Allahu A'lam when they're going to be cured, if at, no. So the ability to do so. And then, yes, and then the other is an iqama, meaning residency, so that they're not traveling, right? That you're not doing a business trip, you're not going somewhere, that you're at home. Now, there's a caveat with this. Someone who is traveling, they do have a choice, right? And that goes into a deeper discussion, but it's time for salat, so we'll forego that discussion. But the person who's traveling has a choice. They can fast if they want to, and they can break their fast if they want to, right? It does essentially go back to them, and which is easiest for them. But the choice is theirs. That's the point. And then lastly, and this is for women, that they are not going through menses, right? That time of the month. And then they are also not going through postpartum, meaning after giving birth. It's not allowed for them to fast when they are in either of those states. However, a note, it is their responsibility. It is their responsibility to be mindful and to check during the month of Ramadan, for them to check themselves, right, when that time is done, because it is then an obligation on them as soon as they are clean, right? وَإِذَا طَهَرَتْ فِي أَثْنَاءِ الْيَوْمِ لَمْ يَلْزِمْهَا الْإِمْسَاكُ وَعَلَيْهَا الْقَضَاءُ. So if they're no longer in that state, whether it's menses or postpartum bleeding, right? And let us say it happens at night, right? They will now have to fast the following day, right? They will have to fast the following day, if it happened at night, because now they have the opportunity to make ghusl, etc., right? And make the niyyah for the following day. If, however, it happens that they're no longer in that state in the middle of the day, they woke up and they were still in their menses, or it was still having postpartum bleeding in the middle of the day, and then it stops, and then now they would clean themselves, etc. That day now, right? They don't have to fast that day, but they do have to make that day up. They do have to make that day up, right? And with that, we finished with the rulings regarding the fasting of Ramadan. Obviously, this is not everything. Obviously, we did not go into intimate details about every single thing, but these are some of the basic, fundamental, most important things that all of us need to know. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us to be able to implement what we learn here and what we've heard here and take the best of it and implement it. And anything that was mentioned that was wrong or inaccurate is from my own self, my shortcomings, and from the shaitan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from him, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to reach the blessed, sacred month of Ramadan. Allahumma ameen. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Barakallahu feekum.
We need a muezzin. صحيح.
Oh, that's the wrong one.
الله أكبر الله أكبر
Is it just the X?
الله أكبر
Is it just the X?
الله